Well, 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 would you look at that? It appears that Joe Biden has officially come forward and announced the pardoning of his son Hunter. And by all means, when it comes to the fact of what's going on here, everyone, and I mean absolutely everyone, should have seen this coming. This is undoubtedly the most human thing a politician has ever done, and in many ways, the only respectable thing Joe Biden has ever done in his entire life throughout his entire political career. And why might that be? Because when the entire world had their crosshairs and their eyes upon you at the end of your administration, you were willing to step up to the plate and protect your son. And by all means, that is a respectable and commendable thing to do. But of course, that's not actually specifically why Joe Biden did this. If that was the sole reason, he would actually have my respect for being a father willing to defend his child. But as we know, when it comes to the standards of what we see going on with this most recent pardon of Hunter Biden, we would understand one thing, and what might that be? That this is nothing more than a subversive way for Joe Biden to cover his ass. That's right. Of course, as we've been told so many times by the corporate press, the media class itself, or Biden himself, or the surrogates within his administration, that he would never pardon his son Hunter because this goes against the standards of democracy and the rule of law. But as we know, politicians, being nothing more than soulless vassals for evil who will lie through their teeth to do whatever it is that they desire to get the end goal that they see best fit for them, well, we can understand that these things that we were told so consistently about Hunter Biden not receiving a pardon was nothing more than a lie.
Second one, would the president pardon or commute his son if he's convicted?
So I've answered this question before. It was asked of me not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I was very clear and I said no.
Hey, let me go back to the first question of the briefing. I know you said not a lot's changed since yesterday and that it's a personal matter, but from a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Again, you've also said several times that the president would not pardon or commute the sentences for his son, Hunter. I just want to make sure that that is not going to change over the next 6 months. The president's saying he would not.
It's still a no. It's still a no.
It will always be a no.
It's still a no. It will be a no. It is a no, and I don't have anything else to add. Will he pardon his son? No.
As we sit here in Normandy, your son Hunter is on trial, and I know that you cannot speak about an ongoing federal prosecution. But let me ask you, will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
And would you look at that? Straight from the horse's mouth, as well as the regime apparatchiks that serve him, clearly, Hunter Biden was never going to receive a pardon from his father, but of course, as we know, that is complete and utter bullshit. Here we see from the AP, Biden has pardoned his son Hunter. What does that mean? Well, I'll tell you. It means that all of the crimes that Hunter Biden has committed, that you yourself would be thrown in a jail cell for, he'll be able to escape culpability and be able to get away with it and do it again. Meanwhile, you would have to suffer under the weight of the law. But of course, as we know, the political and elite class, they're able to skate past these things because of their connections with those in power, which is one thing that we need to consider. So many of the times we see things coming out of people like Joe Biden talking about one certain set of standards and then operating in a totally different fashion. And that just leads us to one important takeaway, that these people, they operate on a double standard. And in fact, if they didn't have a double standard, then they wouldn't have any. One of the biggest takeaways to realize for so many people when it comes to this layer of politics, because I've seen many people within that of even the liberal and Democrat establishment, not specifically within the regime and their apparatchiks and those who are amalgamated within that system, but those who are, let's say, more caught up within the fervor of the school of thought that has been perpetrated by the greater whole that is the establishment Democrat class. Well, those people are seeing something like this and wondering, what? Why is it that we're going against our word? I thought we were the people that stood upon principle. As we heard so many times, the adults are back in charge. The people who respect the rule of law are back in the White House. But yet again, we see this is proven complete and total bullshit. Jumping in now, we scroll down, we see President Joe Biden has long pledged that he would not pardon his son Hunter, who is set to be sentenced this month for gun and tax convictions. But on Sunday, the president did it anyways. The sweeping pardon covers not only Hunter Biden's convictions in 2 cases in Delaware and California, but also any other offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during that period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024. Biden is hardly the first president to deploy his pardon powers to benefit those close to him, but it is still a surprising reversal for a man who pledged to restore norms and respect the rule of law. And no, it is not a surprising reversal. Anyone who is actually surprised by this, I would argue, doesn't actually understand politics. What's a pardon? The U.S. Constitution says that a president has the power to grant clemency, which includes both pardons and commutations. A pardon forgives federal criminal offenses, and a commutation reduces penalties but isn't as sweeping. The power has its roots in English law. The king could grant mercy to anyone, and it made it over to the ocean in the American colonies and stuck around. The U.S. Supreme Court has found the presidential pardon authority to be very broad, and presidents use that power a lot. Donald Trump had granted 237 acts of clemency during his 4 years in office, and Barack Obama granted clemency 1,927 times in his 8 years. Presidents have forgiven drug offenses, fraud convictions, and Vietnam-era draft dodgers, among many other things. But a president can only grant pardons for federal offenses, not state ones. Impeachment convictions also aren't pardonable. Moving down now, here we see, what are the crimes Hunter Biden was accused of committing? Hunter Biden was convicted in June of lying on a federal form where he purchased a gun in 2018 and swore that he wasn't a drug user, which I think it's stupid of the fact that Hunter Biden even had to say that he wasn't a drug user to purchase a firearm. I think if you are someone who is doing something that is not affecting other people and you are doing so independently and you are making the decision with your own autonomy, you should still be able to make the decision to also purchase a firearm. It is not the business of the government to understand what goes on behind closed doors in your home that also influences your ability to purchase something that is the ultimate arbiter for your defense. That is complete bullshit. This is not a charge that bothers me in any way. Just months later, he pleaded guilty to charges accusing him of a scheme to avoid paying at least $1.4 million in taxes. I'm not a fan of taxes. I realistically think that it's nothing more than theft, so this actually is not something that I have issues with. The issue that I have is that he is able to skate the culpability for these actions. Meanwhile, if you or I were to do exactly this, we would be rotting in a jail cell for the majority of the rest of our lives. Prosecutors alleged he lived lavishly while flouting the tax law, spending his cash on things like strippers and luxury hotels. In short, everything but his taxes. Which is exactly what you should be able to spend all of your money on, everything but taxes. Everything but the thievery of the government sticking their hand in your pocket and taking 40% of the value of your labor, and then also taxing you at every single other transaction around every single corner that you have within the economy. Anyways, nonetheless, we see here they're claiming that he was spending money on things like strippers and luxury hotels. Okay, let's at least address the fact that Hunter Biden is probably the most fun person in the Biden family. He drives fast cars, he does drugs, he fucks hookers. This guy's probably at least the most entertaining person in this family at a party. Let's be real. Here we see both cases stem from a period in Hunter Biden's life in which he struggled with drug and alcohol abuse before becoming sober in 2019. And while I most certainly do not believe that he is sober in the current day, if that is something that he has done, congratulations. But nonetheless, I don't really give a shit. After the gun trial aired salacious and unflattering details about Hunter Biden's life, the president's son said he agreed to plead guilty to the tax charges to spare his family another embarrassing criminal trial. Here we now have the real meat and potatoes of what's actually important to pay attention to with this story, the true reason behind why Hunter Biden was pardoned by his father. The tax trial was also expected to showcase details about Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings, which Republicans have seized on to try and paint the Biden family as corrupt. Hunter Biden was supposed to be sentenced this month in the 2 cases by judges in California and Delaware, both of which nominated to the bench by Trump. Special counsel David Weiss's office had not said whether prosecutors had planned to seek prison time. The tax charges carried up to 17 years behind bars, and the gun charges were punishable by up to 25 years in prison. Though federal sentencing and guidelines were expected to call for far less time, and it was possible that the younger Biden would avoid prison time entirely. Let's now pay attention to this highlighted bit for but a moment, and then we'll throw it into the clip of Joe Biden openly stating how he was wielding his power in Ukraine to get a Ukrainian prosecutor fired, Viktor Shokin, so he could stop the investigation that was going on into Burisma, which would have exposed him and his illicit business dealings in Ukraine using his son as nothing more than the avatar for his will. Anyways, here we see, in yellow, the tax trial was also expected to showcase details about Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings, which Republicans have seized on to try and paint the Biden family as corrupt. And yes, it is because they are corrupt. Why is that you, Associated Press, haven't seized on this to expose these things? Oh, it's because you're nothing more than a CIA cutout organization and you do nothing more than the bidding of the regime because you craft the narratives that then other outlets source, which if you actually follow the back channel and you see where so many of these different stories end up coming from, it ends up emanating from sources that are coming from the AP. And when you look and see who the AP gets its information from, it is almost always the intelligence community. Something to consider. Here we see the tax charges carried up to 17 years behind bars, and the gun charges were punishable by up to 25 years in prison. It's possible the younger Biden will avoid prison time entirely. So you yourself, the average everyday American, would possibly be met with 17 to 25 years in prison. But of course, Joe Biden's going to allow his son to skate past these things because he is nothing more than political royalty. Absolutely insane, but not as insane as Joe Biden openly stating what he did in Ukraine to exert his authority on camera. Some further context for you here. You see, in 2006, Ukrainian Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin in his investigation into the corruption involving Burisma Holdings, a natural gas company, identified Hunter Biden as the recipient of over $3 million from the company. Not wanting this corruption exposed, Joe Biden swung into action using U.S. loan guarantees as hostage while demanding Shokin be fired. Amazingly, Joe Biden now brags about his actions in this matter.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, what, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
What's so incredible about that clip is that if Joe Biden or anyone that was an honest person was in that situation, or let's just say less of a lying, cretinous scumbag, you would realize that what they were unintentionally doing, which is what Joe Biden unintentionally did, except they would be far more self-aware in the moment to realize what it is that they were doing, is that they are admitting their role in illicit dealings and illegal actions on the world stage. But how is it that this is couched by Joe Biden? That he's flexing his power and his might as the front man for Ukraine during the Obama administration. And in the process, what does he do? He basically tells them, oh, you don't like this? Fine, go ahead, call the big guy. And who's that? Well, it's his commander-in-chief, Barack Obama, insinuating that Barack Obama is very well aware of what is going on here and was doing nothing to shift the dynamics of how Joe Biden and his family were exploiting places like Ukraine and their energy sector for large portions of cash. But the thing that we would need to pay attention to here would be what? That it wasn't just the fact of the Biden family doing this because it's the Biden family raking in cash, it's what they would be operating as an envoy to make sure they could shift the dynamics of power, because the Biden family is nothing more than political royalty, thus they will be forced to operate as such, being nothing more than deleterious agents for the regime, which is exactly what we saw Hunter Biden be forced to act as in Ukraine during his time as a board member for Burisma. Here we see from Clint Russell, it's not about prostitutes, it's not about being his son, it's not about smoking crack, and it's not about gun charges or taxes. It's about Joe Biden using Hunter Biden as the CIA's bagman in Ukraine for every corrupt activity that you can imagine. That's why he was pardoned. And that is absolutely true. Scrolling down just a little bit, we see something that I found quite fascinating. Someone here said, I'm going to be real. I would do it if it were my son too. We can talk right or wrong all day, but I'm not going to fake like I wouldn't forgive my family in almost any situation. And I totally understand this, and I completely sympathize with this point with my entire being, because while I don't have a son, I do have a sister, and I know the lengths that I would go to make sure that I protected her, no matter the fact of the actions that she had committed. So it's perfectly reasonable that Joe Biden, being a father, while he still is a corrupt piece of shit, would be willing to step forward to protect his son. While I've stated that is not the reason that he has done this, and this is nothing more than a subversive play to cover his own ass as well as the establishment's, what we need to realize is that, alas, this is a very human moment and perhaps the most human thing we've ever seen out of an establishment politician. Scrolling a little further down, we see, from Texan Dog Dad, we see if it were the prostitutes, guns, drugs, etc., it would have been a narrow pardon, specifically mentioning what he was pardoned for. But no, he did a decade-long blanket pardon. This isn't just a he did a bad thing, that's we need to cover our ass from cash. There's a very interesting point to be made here that it could have very well been the factor of choosing Kash Patel to lead the FBI as the new director under the next coming Trump administration that was the major tipping point that ended up pushing the Biden administration towards announcing this broad sweeping pardon for Hunter Biden himself. Quite fascinating to see. And realistically, the only interesting thing that you could actually take away from this CNN article would be this here. Kash Patel, Donald Trump's pick to lead the FBI, an ardent supporter of the president-elect, has vowed to help dismantle the organization he's poised to lead. He is someone who absolutely despises the deep state and the internal machinations of DC politics, and has been a steadfast communicator for freedom and liberty for quite some time, and I must admit he is unbelievably intelligent. And not only that, Kash Patel has been someone that's been talking about what's going on with the Biden family and Burisma in Ukraine for a good while now. And not only that, also the fact of how we need to go after the Epstein flight log, we need to release the documents, we have to release the black box on the plane, we have to go after and release the JFK files. Kash Patel is truly on the money on absolutely every topic except Israel. But alas, that's the problem with all of these politicians in Washington. It doesn't matter left or right. Anyways, moving on, now we go to finish this off with this statement from Joe Biden himself. Here we see, today I signed a pardon for my son Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making process, and I kept my word even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. Without aggravating factors like use in a crime, multiple purchases, or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser, people are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they have filled out a gun form. Those who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions but paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties are typically given non-criminal resolutions. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently. The charges in his case came only after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election. Then a carefully negotiated plea deal agreed to by the Department of Justice unraveled in the courtroom, with a number of my political opponents in Congress taking credit for bringing political pressure on the process. Had the plea deal held, it would have been a fair, reasonable resolution to Hunter's cases. No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out because he is my son, and that is wrong. There has been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years sober, and even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. In trying to break Hunter, they've tried to break me, and there's no reason to believe it will stop here. Enough is enough. For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle. Just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but just as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process as it has led to a miscarriage of justice. And once I made this decision this weekend, there was no sense in delaying it any further. I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision. Joe Biden as a father, I can understand making that decision. But Joe Biden as a corrupt politician wanting to make sure that he could save his own ass and save his own legacy, or at least attempt to, is also something I can understand. Here we see, to finish it off, Executive Grant of Clemency, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States of America. To all of whom these present shall come, greeting. Be it known that this day I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States, pursuant to my powers under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution, have granted unto Robert Hunter Biden a full and unconditional pardon for those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024, including but not limited to all offenses charged or prosecuted, including any that have resulted in convictions, by Special Counsel David C. Weiss in docket number 123 CR 00061 MN in the United States District Court of the District of Delaware, and docket number 223 CR 00599 MCS 1 in the United States District Court of the Central District of California. In testimony whereof, I hereunto sign my name and cause the pardon to be recorded with the Department of Justice, done at the City of Washington this first day of December in the year of our Lord 2024, and of the independence of the United States 249th. So what we can see here is the pardon itself announced with all of this ridiculous, nonsensical tomfoolery bullshit language that the government likes to put out to make it seem like they are professional. Meanwhile, what they are actually doing is effectively scapegoating responsibility for their own actions, which of course you will never be able to do. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. There's really not much more I have to say here. Thank you for watching. If you got this far, thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. And most importantly, my friends, please go tell someone you love them. Peace out.